think Greg needs to go. I think he needs to just exit stage left, and look, he's made his mark, but I think now's the right time to sort of say, look, you've got this thing off the ground, but no one's going to talk unless there's an adult in the room that can actually try to mend fences. And if those two things happen, then things can happen. But right now, it's a stalemate because there can't be any other way. So hopefully something can happen. Who knows? But right now, I think the two separate entities, PGA Tour, European Tour, and LIV, they're just going to keep going both their separate ways, and one's a very different product to the other, and they're just going to keep going until something happens, and whether that's in the hands of a court or a judge, or if something else happens along the way, no one really knows. But right now, it seems like it's just a bit of a stalemate.
Damon Hack with Eamon Lynch, Rory McIlroy in Dubai, talking about CEO of LIV Golf, Greg Norman needing to go, saying these fences needed to be mended between the PGA Tour and LIV. How do you mend these fences, Eamon Lynch? What did he mean?
I don't know if he's talking about mending fences between the various tours as opposed to perhaps between the players as well. What the comments did show was the distaste that Rory McIlroy has for Greg Norman, which is not a minority opinion among a lot of players who have distaste for Greg, including some who are actually being paid by LIV right now. But ultimately, this is not a Greg Norman problem. Here, the problem with LIV is where the money's coming from, what the purposes of LIV is for, which is essentially sports washing the Saudis' human rights record. And that issue is not really going away at all. And it really begs the question of what a resolution to this would ultimately look like. Is it, based on the conversations I've had with Rory McIlroy, I suspect his idea is that these are two separate entities, drop litigation, stop trying to wedge your way into the ecosystem, and just you do what you're going to do, we're going to do what we're going to do on the other side of it. I don't think what he's intending is what some people will now pretend is the solution, which is that they ought to be welcomed into the broader golf ecosystem, because there is no circumstances in which Saudi investment in golf can be made clean. Any acceptance of Saudi money in golf on behalf of the government of Saudi Arabia will come at great commercial and reputational ruin for the sport of golf.
But you're not hearing any capitulation whatsoever from Rory McIlroy, maybe missing the competitive juice that a Brooks Koepka would bring, or a Bryson DeChambeau, or a Cameron Smith. You don't see those comments in Dubai earlier today ahead of the DP World Tour finale as being a player who maybe is getting weary and tired of this line of questioning and saying, doggone it, let's just find some sort of resolution where the best players in the world are all united again.
If he was getting weary of the line of questioning, I'm sure he would have told people that, but it's got to be worrying him at some point. And he's made the point that he does want to compete against the best players in the world. But ultimately, whatever the resolution is, and he mentioned it could come from the various litigation that's out there, he talked about something else may happen, which that could be the Saudis simply get bored or get embarrassed by the lack of traction and pull the plug on it. So there's so much unknown here. He's a golfer. He wants to play against the best players in the world. Whatever this is resolved, it's going to come from the PGA Tour's board. And today, the PGA Tour added Jimmy Dunne to its board. And Jimmy Dunne has painful memories of what happened on September 11th in this country. And he's been very vocal on the issue of the Saudis in golf and the LIV product itself, which he's dismissed as mere exhibition golf. So there isn't really an appetite for welcoming LIV golf into a broader golf ecosystem, because I think a lot of people, including Rory McIlroy, know what the potential cost of that would be.
But to hear Rory McIlroy say, remove Greg Norman as CEO, would sound to some like you remove the World Golf Hall of Fame member and then some sort of discussions can take place. Is this just a function of Rory McIlroy being so thoughtful and so much of a uniter, and so much of wanting no conflict in the game that he's maybe talking himself into a little bit of a pickle by even suggesting that you remove Greg Norman and then some sides, some adults can come to the table?
Well, not everyone in Northern Ireland is conciliatory, as Rory McIlroy is. I'll take the blame on that one. I think what he's talking about is the nature of the public comments Greg Norman has been making repeatedly don't help resolve any situation. Because Greg has attacked the PGA Tour, the DP World Tour, the official World Golf Rankings, all of the majors by name, and alleging a conspiracy against him. And it just seems like there's this kind of narcissistic grievance going on that's the entire LIV Tour is associated with Greg Norman. It has many issues, LIV Tour. Greg Norman and his personality are the least troubling among them, but it's certainly the most public face of LIV.
It does seem like, to me anyway, that the PGA Tour, what it represents in terms of how it presents its competition versus what LIV Golf is, where the money comes from, or even from a competitive standpoint, 54 holes, shotgun starts, the money not seeming to match the performance that we're seeing inside those ropes. How much do you see these two products just anathema with one another at loggerheads? I mean, even from a competitive standpoint, I don't see how you would make it work, let alone where that money is coming from for LIV.
And this really comes down to what lens you choose to see the LIV issue from. And there are really three lenses. If you're the PGA Tour, you see it really through a commercial lens, that this is a business threat. If you're a player, you see it through a competitive lens. And is there a competitive integrity to what the product is? And in my case, I see it purely through a moral lens. And to me, I can't get past that part of it, that it is purely where the money's coming from. Who's throwing the money out doesn't really matter. Who Greg Norman is bestowing the riches upon. To me, the issue is where the money's coming from and what the intent of it is. And that's really not going to change with a change in leadership out there.